we have a short window of while that transformation is happening to really guide what it looks like. But once it's become systematized, it becomes really hard to undo it. We are all parenting AI right now. AI is a little baby, and we're all parenting it into this world. And we need to understand what this powerful, powerful new baby can do for us and what it might do for us if we don't get our hands on at least a little bit of it. In this short amount of time we have an incredible opportunity to shape what AI becomes. And so that's what I would encourage all leaders to do, is lean in. Don't be scared. You guys did choose to be leaders because you were frightened of the unknown. You chose it because you were ready for it.
Welcome to another episode of the AI Math Guy podcast, where we reimagine public education in the age of AI. Today, we have an incredible guest with Kunal, and he has been a friend. Could you just tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you've been thinking about lately? And yeah, just opening up the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, you are the AI math guys, so luckily I don't have to worry about talking about AI, since that's what I talk about all day and night.
Sure.
And I know some people are tired of me talking about AI, but that's
Mm.
that's the topic right now, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So my previous life, I was a high school teacher, high school principal. I worked in school admin up in the Bay Area, and then I was in kind of a variety of ed tech companies working on really the education angle. And that was before generative AI, where ed tech became so glutted now compared to what it was
Mm.
back then. There were still plenty of products and plenty of vendors, but at the time it was really more about thinking about online instruction and all of that, and that's what I was really focused on. And obviously of late, ed tech has just become AI tech in classrooms. Is really, we could just call it that at this point. And
Mm.
so my work now, since leaving Orange County Department of Ed, I've been working with schools, with districts, with superintendent leaders, and now also with businesses, really trying to explore what AI and now this transition to an agentic AI world, which is very different than the chatbot AI world that we've been in, what that transition means both for students, though I think the first lens really is one of organizations and how organizations run themselves, schools, obviously districts being an organization, and how can agentic AI really inform some of those kind of fundamental infrastructure changes that we really do need to make in education if we want to keep up with everything that's happening. We've already
Mm.
been struggling in education, right? And so
Yeah.
now with AI, I think we have not just a renewed responsibility, but I think we have a renewed opportunity where we can be like, you know what? Okay, maybe we didn't get it right this time, but hey, we have another chance. And so
Mm.
that's what I'm trying to help folks just
Yeah.
guide to some good version of that.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that, Kunal. And you're right. In terms of ed tech, there was a lot of focus on instruction, and I've seen a lot of different startups and tech focused on instruction and what tutoring could look like using AI to tutor. And I do see you write about agents, and that is something that I'm very curious about. And it seems like chatbots, like you said, the things that we've seen so far is very different from what you're talking about in terms of agents. I did actually try to read some of your posts about agents, and I was like, I think I'm just gonna ask him on the podcast because it was awesome, but it was a lot of just I was like, man, it's I need
A
maybe a
lot of
little bit more
gobbledygook.
guidance. That yeah. Just helping to understand. And I
Yeah.
love the fact because you're not just studying agents in a vacuum. You're studying agents as it relates to, like you said, the infrastructure of education and
Yeah.
how it applies to districts and district leaders and how they should think about it and how that can affect and influence the way that districts are. Yeah, would you be willing to speak a little bit more about
Yeah.
agentic AI?
Yeah. So I think first it's useful to really understand what that term even means, because I think the term agents and agentic gets thrown around now. It's sort of become the new jargon of like
Sure.
a new marketing term. When I talk about agents and agentics, I don't necessarily mean the same thing when I'm talking about those two. Agentic, I think there's confusion around like if you use agents, then you're agentic. Well,
Mm,
not maybe, maybe not. But really, what you're looking at is you're really trying to with agents, you're creating essentially like an LLM driven automation. So it's just like you have
mm,
and I'll do a really simple example like an email
mm,
agent, right? So you have an
mm,
email agent. What how does that work? Well, you have some kind of trigger, right? That trigger might be you saying, go agents, go check my email, or it might be time, right? It's like at noon,
mm,
4 p.m. every day, go do this, right? And then that triggers a software, essentially a little piece of software that tells ChatGPT or LLM or whatever you're using to go to your email, read your emails, and then tell you which ones are important, draft responses for the ones you want to draft, etc. And then it comes back to you with the summary of whatever it is, right? That agent that read your email, you could consider that an agent. But the whole system from start to finish, that's what you would call an agentic system. In this case, you're still triggering all of the output, right? In a truly agentic system, you're not doing any of that because you've built it in such email is tricky because email is like your voice. But when you're thinking about other processes, you're really trying to figure out how you can have a smart way to get a system to help you optimize another system. And that is where it starts to get sort of meta because you're no longer thinking about human in the loop. You're actually thinking about human building the loop. And at first, a human optimizing the loop, but eventually you've created an AI sort of QA or task force that checks out your loop for you. And then you don't have to do that anymore once you've optimized it. And what that allows us to do is it actually starts to properly, in a proper way, remove some of the sort of tedium of things like writing emails and creating proposals that all have kind of a similar structure. You just need to, reformat some of that. Instead of putting that all into ChatGPT and then you manually doing all that, an agentic team can do that for you. And then you can create systems that optimize that to make it better each time to the point where by the fifth time you're running it, it's going to do the process better than you. And you're happy about that because you're like, good, I actually have something that can do this better than me. And so that's where, when I think about agentics in education, I'm really thinking about how can we, as an education, so let's call it a district, right? That has data sources all over the place in all these different weird boxes. Some of it's in PowerSchool, some of it's in Google Docs, some of it's just in emails, some of it's in board meeting press releases, whatever. All of that information, if we can slowly make the transition, ideally quickly, but slowly will work too. But we make the transition to where we can re-own that data. All these companies like PowerSchool, et cetera, it's very important for them to hold on to your data because then you need their software to understand your data that lives on their servers. But if you own it, and then you have the sort of capacity to unleash a swarm of agents on your data that you own locally, either on your own machine or on some server that you have for yourself, the level of insight you can get about students, about teachers, about finances, budget. You can create ad hoc dashboards. You'd be like, you know what, just create a dashboard based on this, and this, and then it just makes it, right? And that takes 5 minutes. It does it autonomously. You don't have to look at it. And then when it comes back, you can go look at it, decide if it was good, and then redo it again if you want. It gives us a way of visibility into schools, districts, and the whole complex machinery that is absolutely impossible for us to do otherwise. There's so many people working so hard to try to do it, and it is impossible. Watching some of these folks, these poor folks who are doing deep research into analyzing whether grants actually did the thing that it's supposed to do, spending 2 weeks, 3 weeks building that report. And I'm just thinking, my goodness, this could take 10 minutes with agents. And then you figure out what to do with that data. What do you do with the insights rather than spending 2 weeks to go figure out what your insight is? Once you figure out that insight in 10 minutes, and then now let's spend 2 weeks figuring out what to do with it. That's my hope. I hope that we can get to a point where we can really create agentic systems in schools so that that kind of visibility becomes a lot more simple.
Wow, that's nuts. Honestly, like I've met you in person several times, and you were like a
And I,
very like easygoing, "Hey, what's up, dude?" Very chill guy. And then now that we're actually like talking about, now that I have the privilege and the honor to just sit down and listen to you talk about AI on this level, I was like thinking, man, you are thinking on just another level that I think most people, even in ed tech, honestly, because I'm in ed tech, like
Hmm.
like they're not even thinking about this stuff yet. And I think I just need a little bit. I'm gonna summarize some of the stuff that you said, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna ask some questions just for clarity
Please.
on my own mind. So the first thing that you said that was just like absolutely mind blowing was when you said we're moving from the human in the loop to human building the loop. I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, dude, that is a next level paradigm. So the way that works, as you explained, was like email is a little bit tricky, but let's just use email. You are currently in the loop of there's some conditional. It says if X condition is met, then go through these emails, summarize it, whatever. So there's some
Mhm.
trigger. And then you are currently in the loop. So this trigger happens, you validate it's good, and therefore now you do X with it.
Mhm.
And you are the one maybe sending another agent saying, okay, now go ahead and
Right.
do X with the information now that you've
Yep.
given to me.
And you're
What you are
reviewing all the emails and you're reviewing everything and you're making sure it's good before you send it. Yep, exactly.
exactly. So you are still in the loop of reviewing and yeah,
Mhm.
reviewing and making sure that is good, and then you send it. What you are saying is that you can now bring in another agent in that position that you are currently in, and then now you maybe give a set of data. Maybe I don't know. They could look
Mhm.
at all of your emails. I don't know. Let's just say
Mhm.
it does, and then you train it and say, and then it would actually do better than how you would do it because of the immense amount of data. It doesn't get tired, all that.
Yep. All of that, all of
And
that.
then now you have essentially built this system, you call it, right? I think,
Mhm.
right? System where
An agentic system, yeah.
an agentic system where now the human is looking at this system and just making sure that this system is working well, but
Yes.
essentially has now taken the human out of the loop to a certain
Mhm.
extent. Except, no, they're still there. It's not in the loop anymore. It's almost like meta, like you're saying,
Yeah,
where
you're the
you're like,
supervisor. You can think of yourself as sort of like you're the supervisor of your autonomous agentic teams. And depending on how comfortable you get and how well you've trained your team, you can either let them fully go because you trust them and you know that they do good work, or just like with another team that you're like, they do decent work, but I got to go check it every time. I'm not fully confident in what they have. Same as humans, right? It's just as you try, like there are teams that when you lead, you're like, the less I talk to them, the better they'll work. They just give me what you have. Like you just do it. So that's sort of the parallel.
wow, that's okay. Yeah, that's pretty. It's almost like training like new employees, but these new employees have like such incredible raw power and they will learn like way faster.
Yep.
And at the same
Yep.
time, there has to be some kind of supervision, like you said,
Yep.
supervising agentic teams. Wow, that's crazy.
It's a wild
Before,
world.
yeah, so there's one question that I want to ask, but before that question, because my question is, how did you come up with this idea? Or like maybe you studied it or you heard it from people.
Hmm.
I don't know, but that's another question.
Hmm.
So when we say agents, that's different from chatbots. Are you saying that agent is the entity or the thing that which where a trigger happens, it executes X, that
Hmm.
flow of trigger and execute, that you call agents, or is agent something else?
So I would consider the chatbot that is reading my email and it's doing it and creating a draft of what it needs to do. That's essential. That's my little agent that is sort of autonomously reading emails, autonomously creating potential drafts, autonomously labeling them yellow, green, or red. I built an email agent for myself a little while ago, and it made a big error about a month ago where a very important email it did not flag as important. And so I was like, oh, I need to get back in that loop now and I need to see what's happening. And you can then deploy agents into your loop. So your agent, this observer agent or team of observer agents, I always work with teams of agents, minimum 5 agents, because single agents can make mistakes just like chatbots, just like humans. But if you have five, I find five to be a good number, but everybody's checking each other's work and making sure things are okay. Once you've what, so I would probably, if I now my email, I actually have three separate readers. Each one reads differently, and then they have to actually come to a consensus on everything. So I've created a much more optimized loop just because of that. Before it was a chatbot that had custom instructions that was then told to do all of it. Now I have five different or three different prompts for each one of those agents, and they essentially they are supposed to sort of criticize each other, and so they can come up with something in the end. And that started to work a lot better. But yeah, you are really moving from human loop to human creating the loop, and the agent to me is the piece of software that creates the thing that it needs to create. The flow is when you have the trigger happen, you have the email being read, the email being drafted, and it being sent all in one go. And maybe you just get a little notification ping right there and says, hey, you have these three emails, these are the drafts sent, you can look at them if you want, don't look at them if you don't want. That's when you really start to get deeply agentic. And I think where you start to see this really explode is, and we're starting to see it really explode in sort of like industries where you have to have digital systems sort of vet things and decide things. So legal is one, healthcare is another. There are a lot of spaces where you put in a lot of digital information and then you have to go through a bunch of steps to make sure things are that the data you got is good, is useful, can actually be helpful. And before, that would take a team of very highly skilled with deep domain expertise, probably therefore very highly paid, to then have to review all of those painstakingly slow. All of that's gone now, and you can streamline that process. And now, when research and finding information is no longer the bottleneck, now the bottleneck becomes our decision making. Like, what do we do with that information? And that's what I've found with this space, especially going into the agentic space, is the learning curve isn't all that steep, but the what do I do with it now curve, that's a steep curve because we don't know what to do with it now because we've
Mm.
spent so much of our time looking for information. We don't know what to do when we have it all in our
Mm.
hands. So that's really the transition I'm seeing.
Wow. So what you're sharing is that 5 teams, and 5 seems like a pretty good number. And what you have is agents checking their work, which makes sense. So one of the things that like our agent that we do for math is as we're building it, we actually had Google Gemini and Claude and OpenAI with all looking at the same thing, but we would check the feedback that it's giving to a potential student with each of
Hmm.
them and seeing which one and have them correct and criticize one another. So that's actually really cool. And like you're saying about what do I do with this information, right? That's what you said in the beginning
Hmm.
is let's give all of this data that districts then own. And instead of thinking like taking 2 weeks to write this grant or how it met the standards, now do, they can start thinking about what they can do with that information.
Exactly.
So I want to ask, and you could choose which question you want to tackle. The first question is, where does this idea originate from? Did it just come from as you were just like philosophizing? Because that's what I do often. Like when I think about AI, just like I actually majored in philosophy, so it helps out.
Oh,
But
that's
just like
good.
philosophizing, just like talking to other people. But I like, and it's like agents are like thinking about AI is like so much more about philosophy, I feel, than
Yep.
code and like the technicalities of it. Or at least that's how I feel right now. Maybe it's because
Completely.
I'm not into like machine learning and all those guys. So, and then you're right, bottleneck becomes the decision making, the research, all that stuff in the loop that requires so much domain expertise can now
Hmm.
be facilitated by a team of agents. And so that's number one. My first question is why or how did you think of this? And I think the reason why I want to ask this also is because it speaks to about human creativity. And not everybody can think like this, or I don't know if can. I'm sure everybody
Sure.
can, and it just not everybody is thinking this way. And I'm just very
Hmm.
curious as to what your mechanism of thinking,
Hmm.
so that I can replicate it and do it for myself. So that's my question number one. And for others, like
Okay.
people who are
Yeah.
listening to
Yeah.
this, I'm sure are very curious. So that's number one. So you could
Hmm.
choose this one, or number two. Now, practically going into the infrastructure of school districts and helping superintendents or education in general. How do you see this agentic team that you're talking about then being applied specifically, and how this now then will affect education as a whole? So you
Yeah.
could tackle
Yeah.
both, or however you
I'll
want
try
to go
to
about it.
I'll try to tackle both. If I'm talking too long, just cut me off.
Okay. No, for
So
sure.
I'll start with the first one. How did I even get into all this stuff? So, I don't have a previous history of software development, or I'm not a technical person. I've never written a piece of software in my life. And so I did not get into this space through the technical lens. I started with parenting. Like, that's where I first saw where generative AI could really be a thing. I mean, I'd been adjacent to machine learning and AI folks because I was in Silicon Valley and I was like ran a boot camp and all of that, but I didn't know how to do it for myself. But so it started with parenting. And then as I started to get deeper and deeper, and I'm answering this question specifically because I feel like I have a compelling reason why I kept going down this path. I first started with the chatbots and all of that, and I was seeing how creative, how creatively it was helping me kind of find connections with my son in ways that I would not have thought of, just because my brain was fried and I was tired and I wasn't sleeping. And so that was a first step of being like, hold on, there's something really human here. It's not just about this chatbot thing. There's something human here. And that has been my lens right from the beginning. And I'll credit my former colleague Wes for it as well, Wes Creasel, who's at Orange County Department of Ed, who also laser focus on the human experience. And I think we met each other at a really critical time around both of our evolution around AI, where we both played on one another's human centeredness to really
Mm,
push each other on how we could position AI as this human elevating force. So with that, as I started, and I'm just crazy about just knowing what the new thing is, what's happening. I just need to know. It's just part of it's. I'm called input in the Clifton strengths. I just need to know everything. And so as I was thinking about this agentic stuff, this was 2 years ago, well before agents became mainstream talking, right? When I was at ASU GSV 2 years ago, I was asking the question of every vendor, why aren't you talking about agents? And they all looked at me
mm,
like with blank faces. And I was like, but agents are what AI is going to be. It's not going to be this chatbot stuff.
mm,
And so I've been desperate to like for the agents to already start happening for the main
mm,
reason of for me, AI can help us with two very, very critical things. One is our global, and definitely here in the US, epidemic. We can call it a pandemic, although now that means something else, but of loneliness, of isolation, of
mm,
us being stuck in our boxes, staring at our phones, and not knowing what's happening around us. And this is especially true for younger folks. And I think when I started thinking about agents, I started thinking, well, agents could really take away a lot of the things that we have to stare at a computer to do. And that will maybe allow us to talk to one another more. And maybe that'll allow us to go do things that we actually wanted to do more. And that's what sort of set me on this path of how can I continue to explore making AI more time efficient. And then the second piece, which is the energy footprint that these giant data centers make, if we start to develop super purpose built agentic teams, then this entire like library of Congress that everybody has at their fingertips, we don't need a library of Congress to solve our single little problems. But if we can build little tiny agentic teams to do what little digital things that we need to do, we can drastically reduce the amount of energy we're using on these LLMs. And so it like not always, but for the last 2 years, it has been sort of relentless for me to continue pushing how we can move away from these cloud-based LLMs so we don't have to We don't have to replicate our social media kind of techno feudalist model that we have right now. Maybe there's a way we can own a lot of this for ourselves. And so agents, agentic teams, and agentic workflows to me are a way that we take some of that sovereignty back for ourselves. We can own some of those processes for ourselves again, and we don't have to depend solely on big tech companies to be able to help us out. So that's why I keep pushing in this agentic space, because I see it as a way to really, really affect our energy footprint and potentially our creativity footprint. So that's your
Mm.
answer to number one. Answer to number two: how do I look? How does this look at schools for infrastructure and all that? It's going to be it's going to be a road that looks very different depending on the school and depending on the district. And when I was in Orlando last week, I did a session on agentic swarm. Well, it wasn't supposed to be about swarms. I was going to just show them some agentic stuff without building a swarm live, but I got peer pressured into building a swarm live, so I did it. And and I'm glad I did it, because I'd say about half the room, half the table there, they immediately said, "Oh my God, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this." They'd already figured out how they're going to use it. And the other half said, "There's no way I could do this in my district because of this. We got this tenancy here. Our data lives here. This is what happens. This is what happens. And we just can't do it." And so how it affects your infrastructure really depends on your district. And if you have the willingness, that got to be step two or step one. Step two has to be, like, your board's got to be okay with it, all the steps that you need to take to do anything in a public school. If you can create a compelling enough case where you say, "Hey, look, the tools we use right now, as the best intentions we have, I'm afraid they're actually part of the reason why our kids aren't able to get to where they need." Where we are sitting here analyzing every minutia of data using tools that don't actually accurately reflect our students, don't actually accurately reflect our neighborhoods, our families, our parents. Agentics can change all of that, because it doesn't matter what kind of information you have. You can throw in a meeting that you had with parents, notes from that. You can throw in the all the news that's coming out of your local municipality school board notes, plus the curriculum, plus tests, plus previous, like everything. You can own all of that for yourself. And then if you deploy some agentic workflow in there, you can have visibility into your students, into your teachers, into your schools in a way that you can't possibly imagine right now, because we're stuck inside of these boxes that the software developers and the vendors have. And so that's where I see it. It would be a fundamental shift. And for superintendents and school leaders who see the value of it, they can't wait to go. It's just a matter of, can you do it through from a regulatory standpoint?
Wow. So thank you so
That
much
was a
for
lot.
sharing.
Sorry.
No, it's good. No, I love that. And I think the first part of how you came to think about these things, it really wasn't some kind of like mental, philosophical thought process, or maybe it was. And what you mentioned though was your son
Hmm.
and connecting with him. And connecting with him taught you or made you feel something human about the AI, because the AI was giving you tips and insights
Yeah.
to this
Yeah.
relationship that you did not come up on your own, or maybe could have not come up on your own.
Yep. Yep.
And so you saw that, and I'm sure because you care about your son, it caused you to then need to just think about this stuff. So how can I continue to leverage this more and more? And
Hmm.
then led to your formulation of the idea
Yeah.
of agents, which I
Yeah.
think is like really beautiful, because that's what I sense from you, Kunal, is that you're very missional, and you like, even what you're talking about with like loneliness, you called it a pandemic of loneliness, a
Hmm.
global pandemic of loneliness. And that's what I feel like is tugging your heartstrings.
Hmm.
This is the thing that I want to help fix. And that's
Yes.
what is causing you to move forward. And as you're moving forward, you're like, I got to solve this stuff, right? And
Yeah.
in order to solve it, then allows you to think about this
Yeah.
agentic
Yeah.
things. And then you talk about and then you transition. Is that correct? Am I understanding
Yeah,
correctly?
yeah, you got it. And I think I'll just add the last piece, which is that it is, to me, AI is too important for us to mess up. And if we mess it up, like, we let social media run away with us, and we have a generation of kids who are hurting because of it. But also,
Mm,
we had never experienced as a globe this kind of algorithmic kind of, we'll call it influence, you could call it manipulation, whatever you want to call it, but we had never been subject to that, so we didn't know what it could do. Now we know, and we know what these screens plus algorithmic optimization for you can do. My hope is we don't make that mistake again, and so that's part of the push.
so you are seeing social media and the impact that it's had, and you want to make better decisions moving forward
We have
for the
to.
next.
We have
We
to,
have
because
to.
the big tech companies are going to do everything in their power to continue this very, very lucrative model that exists right now for big tech companies. I don't think there's likely never been a group of companies that has amassed so much wealth together so quickly, right? These companies haven't
Mm.
existed for more than 15, 20 years. And yet they're bigger than the largest oil companies that exist, right? And so that speed was because it was so lucrative to sell things through electricity. Someone else is paying for the electricity, someone else built the infrastructure. You just do the thing one time and go sell it to people. Wow, what an amazing lucrative model. They want to obviously replicate that model, and that is what's going to happen if we don't own a little bit of this for ourselves. So that's continues to
Mm.
be my push.
So it seems like the big companies, their motivation, and please let me know if I'm saying this correctly,
Hmm.
it could be maybe money or profit at the
Yep.
cost of, for example, like social media. Like it's very lucrative, makes a ton of people money for people, and yet it's done a huge damage
Yeah.
to a whole generation of kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we want to make sure that we claim, yes, it's raw power, it's good, or I don't know if it's good, but like we have to take this and then we have to funnel it in the right way so that we don't make the same mistakes again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it a lot in how AI is growing in a lot of Africa. And I don't know if I would call it Pan African yet, but certainly you see it in multiple disparate places like in Kenya and in Ghana and South Africa. But you see a very different lens there. It is not
Mm.
the American maximize efficiency, task oriented identity of AI. It is
Oh,
more
wow.
of a sitting in deeper long term. Not, and I'm not saying everybody, right? But it sits in a different place. There's a cultural element to it. This is happening in the UAE as well. There's a cultural element to it. It's not just about here in the US. It's just about like tasks, processes, efficiency, money, and but I think we could learn a lot when we look outside of the US to see how AI is being used in maybe more developing countries, and especially in countries and communities where that interpersonal space hasn't yet been lost through social media. And I think we could learn a lot from those folks too.
Yeah, I really want to explore that. And I know I want to respect your time too, and or want
I
to
can come
respect
back
your
another
time.
time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love the so I'm going to track a little bit, and I just want to ask this question because I think data sovereignty is huge, and instead of having these big tech companies, whether it's Google or Schoology or whatever those guys are,
Hmm.
instead of them owning the data, school districts themselves owning that,
Yep.
and from them then being able to create these loops of agents
Yep.
to be able to do the things, right?
Yep.
It might be a very like novice question, and so if I
We're all
come
novices
off
here,
as
Jay. It's
like
fine.
super novice, then please
It's
forgive me.
okay.
So I have an idea, and at the same time, tell me more about why sovereignty of data, living in data or living in district is important. So I want to
Hmm.
hear your perspective on that. And number
Yep.
two is, yeah, it would be awesome, like to be able to have districts own their own data. And though, in order to deploy teams of agents like the way that you're doing, and you said that you weren't technical, how do you see deploying agents in the way that you're speaking of, where they're like correcting each other, talking to each other,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
criticizing each other. How can that be done without some kind of technicality or code? Because I would
Yeah.
imagine that you would still have to do API calls of sorts to be able to and then customize different prompts, unless you manually
Hmm.
like copy and paste, which I don't think
Sure, sure,
that's
sure.
yeah. So how is that
Hmm.
possible? So the first question is data, and second question is non-technicality
Yeah, like how do
restraints.
you
How
even
do they
build it? Yeah.
exactly?
So first question, data sovereignty. I mean, I think it's a question that we ask here that we don't like Europeans don't ask, right? Because Europeans just assume that they own their own data, and if companies are using it, they have to pay the people for it. And
Mm,
so I think we don't assume that we own our own data, which is a problem for us here in the US. That is a big problem. And it's not just the US, right? There's plenty of places. And so that first is a mindset shift to even think
mm,
that your digital data that exists in the cloud is still your data. Just because it exists in the cloud doesn't mean it's someone else's data anymore. It's still yours. And student
mm,
that counts for student data, that counts for personal data, that counts for all of it, right? And so that's
mm.
the first thing is like let's shift our mindset to imagine that our data can be ours to begin with. We've lived for so long in cloud-based stuff that we forget that we can put things on our computer anymore because we just do everything on the cloud. And so that's step one. And then what step two, or the reason number two is once you localize all your data, then you know where it is. And an agentic swarm, so this will sort of bleed onto your second question. When you own all of that data on a server and it has some kind of file structure, because you're gonna probably create folders of like here's my 10th grade data, and then I'll have like attendance and all that. And agents can do that for you, by the way. What if you have all the raw data, you can set a team of agents to go organize the data for you. You'd have to check it, right? It may not be all accurate, so you might need to do some fixing, but it'll do most of it for you. Once you have that, then you can deploy an agentic team. For example, you can deploy Google Anti Gravity, which is Gemini, and Gemini can, through just simple conversational prompting, and that's how I deploy agents. Is usually sometimes I'll tell it exactly what I'll know exactly what agents I need, but usually I'll just say, hey, this is my goal. Create a swarm of agents to go do this, and Claude Code, which is where I do most of my agentic work, Claude Code then decides. Claude becomes the orchestrator brain and says, "Okay, here's the task. Here are the things we need. I have these agents at my disposal. I think these five will be the perfect ones. Okay, I'll line these up. I'll prompt each one of those five agents with what they need to do, and then I'm gonna watch them and I'll see." And the way these agents work is they all have a common memory. They're all dumping what they're doing into a common memory. The orchestrator, which is Claude, can read that memory and make sure that every agent is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then tell different agents to do different things if need be. And that is with some of these agentic tools, that becomes something that you can just do by just conversation. If you want to build your own sort of local LLM version of that, then yes, you'll probably need an IT person to really to that's there's some technical stuff there. And maybe you're right. I am more technical than I think I am because I would know how to do that. But
Mm.
yeah, so I've gained some technical chops over the last 2 years. But it's not. It's just natural language. And once you've set up your agentic loop or agentic team, depending on whether you've built those agents yourself with very specific prompts that you've decided you already want, or this is what I think is the best option, is you deploy them as needed. And so agents don't need to exist for longer than they need. They can exist for a whole school year. They can exist for 30 seconds. They can exist for a millisecond. And it just to do one thing really quickly and then it goes away. And so my suggestion when I work with folks is don't overthink. We're so used to dashboards and all of that stuff. Don't think about it like that. Think about the question you want to ask. What are you interested in? What are you trying to discover? Or if you don't have the question, go ask it to go into the data and find questions for you, right? Oh, go look at all the attendance data for ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And what question should I be asking? I don't know what it is. Boom. The agentic one will go. It'll come back with questions. So if it all exists in a single place, there are multiple tools that you can just use natural language for. And I use Cloud Code and I pay for it, but you don't need to. There are open source versions of this as well.
So what I'm hearing from you is that most important piece in all of this, if you want to just use natural language, Claude Code, Google Gemini, is common memory of some sorts that these agents can access.
Yeah,
So
and they
if
all have it already as they build these swarms. That is part of the architecture of a swarm is that common and it's part of the way I talk about agentic leadership and agentic organization. And I learned a lot of that from watching AI agent swarms work. I watched like what they did, and I was like, wait, why don't we do that as humans? Like, why is it that
mm,
we have a district leadership team that has a common memory that everyone can look at and we can all make decisions based on the common memory that's accessible at all times and can turn into an ad hoc dashboard to display data whenever we need to. Why don't we have that? We should have that. And with agentic tools, you can have that. You don't need to have these hard walls around your software. You just need your data and then go send your AI agents to figure out whatever visualization, whatever thing you need.
wow. So what you're saying is that you don't need a third party to come and create this nice looking dashboard. Like you said, it's an ad hoc. My understanding of ad hoc is just like tape it together. I don't
Yeah,
know if
yeah,
you,
but
yeah,
these things will make something look really pretty, and so it really could be like you don't have anything except so for example Google anti-gravity, which is you could consider all of these as third-party tools, right? Like so the but you don't have to use Google. I use it because of convenience, but once you start getting into sort of the and I don't have a server that I work off of, so it's fine. But once you start getting server level data, you likely are going to want to create your own, and there's ways to do that that also just use natural language. A little bit of technical background, you do have to set up a little bit of technical stuff. You basically have to set up the AI model to understand that it's an orchestrator and what that means to be an orchestrator and what it needs to do in order to be an orchestrator. And once you've given it that instruction, then it can do the rest on its own.
wow, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think when you went to Florida at FETC and presented on the swarm, and when you say swarm, I'm thinking team, right? Team of
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
agents.
yeah. It
Okay.
was I think 7 agents popped up when I did it, and yeah, they
Yeah.
sort of watched the
Yeah.
swarm as it developed.
Yeah. It'd be so cool one day to see a video of that so that I can tangibilize what you're talking about. And I think it's so important for districts to start thinking about this stuff, this common memory, and being able to use natural language, these large language models, then to get this vast amount of data, draw insights, and think about what they can do in terms of action. And
Yeah.
even getting help from AI in terms of what to
Hmm.
do, the next steps, and even the executions of that. And I think the amount of benefit that can potentially come from that agentic flow, I think is going to be pretty massive.
It's massive in terms of just like administrative numbers, right? But also there's an organization, I don't know if you know them, a company in South Africa called MindJoy. Maybe you've heard of them, but they're an AI platform. And the CEO, her name's Gabby Immelman, she often says that we pay a lot of attention and gather a lot of data around students that are having a hard time. We do not gather data around successful students. Like
Mm,
what made all of those students be really
wow.
good? We have
Wow.
no data around that. And
Wow.
in Agentics, that would be a snap of a finger, and we could collect as much data as we wanted from our top performing students to figure out, okay, what is it? Are there threads that hold these things together? Are there specific things that are replicable skills, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that's a really important point. These it's Agentics isn't just about trying to fix broken things. It's also about imagining new joys that we can and new delight that we can come up with in education. And I think that above all else should be the selling point is like this is a place where we can reconnect with the joy of just being with young people again, not as an extension of what has in many ways become a police state for kids to walk into a lot of schools.
Wow. That's really powerful. I think so often, this is something that Hilda talks about. It's called bright spots, is thinking about what is going right. And I think
Mhm.
a lot, and you as well, I'm sure you've experienced it as educators. We sometimes spend 90% of our energy on the 10% of the students who are having a difficult time, and where the other 90% of kids could benefit from some of our energy and
Yeah,
recognition and
yeah.
acknowledgement for that. And
And those
Yeah, it's
struggling students would likely benefit from our recognizing of those students as well, because there again, there may be things there that we don't know that that other kid needs to know, and maybe there
absolutely.
could be something there.
Yeah, so good. As we're closing out, and I would love to have you back again if you're open to it. What is your like last word of encouragement or hope just to anyone who's listening?
Mhm.
The podcast is really directed towards educational leaders,
Yeah,
superintendents, district leaders, instructional leaders. And so what is your word of hope or
yeah,
encouragement to them?
yeah. I think my we are in this incredible. I mean, the title of my book, this incredible fragile moment, right? We are in an incredible fragile moment, and while there is I understand the desire to be really cautious because this is a massive thing. Being slow will likely mean your exclusion from the development of whatever this becomes. Because just
Mhm.
like all massive transformations, we have a short window of while that transformation is happening to really guide what it looks like. But once it's become systematized, it becomes really hard to undo it. And
Wow.
if we continue on a route where there's an assumed existence of big tech companies who do not have global human welfare as their number one priority, as we know very well at this point. In fact, they make a lot of money off of Discord, and so and not the platform Discord, but you know what I mean. They make a lot of money there, and that is not. And shareholders are not going to walk away being like, no, actually, don't do that anymore, even though that's very lucrative. And so we as educational leaders, as parents, this is what I call AI parentology. It's not just about parents with their kids. We are all parenting AI right now. AI is a little baby, and we are all parenting it into this world. And we need to understand what this powerful, powerful new baby can do for us and what it might do for us if we don't get our hands on at least a little bit of it. And so folks like teachers, folks like parents who are desperate for their kids to have some sort of joy in this future, we have to lean in some way. And this is what I call being present ready is like we talk a lot about being future ready, but to me, obsessing over future readiness is actually you're actually abdicating your responsibility to the future. Like that means someone else has decided your future for you and you're going to go prepare for it. So I call on people to be present ready. Understand what's happening right now. It doesn't mean you need to understand AI super well. It doesn't mean you need to be able to build your own agents or anything like that. Just understand the impact it's having. Be present in right now and make sure the concerns you have and the hopes you have are being heard and and you are loud about it. Because in this short amount of time that we have, and I don't know how long it is, right? Maybe the time has passed, who knows? But in this short amount of time we have an incredible opportunity to shape what AI becomes. And so that's what I would encourage all leaders to do is lean in. Don't be scared. You guys didn't choose to be leaders because you were frightened of the unknown. You chose it because you knew you were ready for it. And this is of all the moments you had in leadership, this is maybe the biggest one. So like we can all step together.
That's beautiful. What you said about the incredible fragile moment and just this, it's like when you get into a car accident, this happened to me, and you have a very short window of fixing the thing at that moment. And if you don't fix it at that moment, and the body molds itself around the brokenness of the thing,
Yep.
then it's really hard to fix. But if you fix it, it's got called a golden hour. I don't know, golden whatever, something in the
Yeah,
medical
yeah,
field.
yeah.
And to
Well,
like, I love what you said. It's so good. Being present ready, and to lean in and to speak. And doesn't mean that you have to be perfect
mm,
and know everything. I think just what you know of to be true and good and beautiful, and to
yep.
step into that and parent the AI that is one day going to grow up and
Yep.
is going to affect all our lives. So
Yep.
thank you so much for just that beautiful ending, Kunal. I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to get on the AI Math Guy podcast. Appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure. You're doing great work, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you.